1796, 12th of October, at a small village in Italy. Kind of a normal day if they wouldn't get attacked by French soldiers. But who would attack an Italian village at that time? No other than Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who put the whole European continent into chaos. But why is he personally part of an attack of a seemingly unimportant village? Because of booty. Napoleon was famous for stealing everything that wasn't nailed down. He and his man once looted a whole museum. So, how did Napoleon become one of the richest living persons at that time? Because there was a lot more behind it than raiding villages. Napoleon was born in 1769 on a small island called Corsica, which, let's be honest, was basically France's backyard. His family wasn't exactly rolling in gold coins, but thanks to some well-placed connections, he got a scholarship to a fancy French military academy. What was a smart move? But there was a problem. He was an outsider, a Corsican in a French world. Therefore, he had to work twice as hard, not just to prove himself, but to survive in a system that looked down on him. Fast forward a few years and boom, the French Revolution happens. Chaos everywhere. Perfect time for an ambitious young man to rise. Napoleon first makes a name for himself in 1793 when he helps recapture Toulon from the British. His reward? A promotion. But promotions don't pay the bills, do they? And France? Still broke. Therefore, Napoleon had to be creative. Here's where things get spicy. In 1796, Napoleon takes command of the French army in Italy. Now, the French government is broke, can't even pay our soldiers broke, so Napoleon does what any good entrepreneur would do. He finds alternative revenue streams. And by alternative revenue streams, I mean stealing, but Napoleon would call it strategic financial acquisitions. He makes Italian cities pay millions of francs in war contributions, so-called protection money. But that wasn't enough. He also loots their art, gold, and silver and ships it back to France. This wasn't just theft. This was an economic strategy. Therefore, France's struggling economy suddenly had a lifeline. The guy is basically running the world's most aggressive startup. He's not just winning battles, he's funding France's economy with his plunder. This is the first time Napoleon really gets rich, and suddenly, he's not just a soldier, he's a power player. But power is addicting, and with more power comes bigger ambitions. Chapter 1, Early Years. By 1799, Napoleon was done playing small. France was still a mess, therefore. He pulled off a little corporate restructuring, also known as a coup d'etat, and made himself first consul. Now, he had direct access to the treasury. That's right, Napoleon wasn't just looting money from his enemies anymore. Now, he was in charge of France's entire financial system, and he was going to run it like a business empire. One of his first big moves was creating the Bank of France. France's economy had been in freefall for years, wrecked by revolution, war, and terrible financial management. Inflation was so bad that people were using paper money for wallpaper, and trust in the currency was non-existent. The country was drowning in debt, the government had no control over banking, and financial chaos reigned. Therefore, Napoleon did what any ambitious leader would do. He took over the entire system. By centralizing banking under state control, he stabilized the economy, restored confidence in the currency, and ensured that money actually had value again. But the Bank of France wasn't just about stability, it was also about power. Now, Napoleon could regulate loans, control how much money circulated, and, most importantly, make sure the state always had cash to fund his growing ambitions. The real issue was the money itself. Before Napoleon, French currency was essentially monopoly money, worthless, untrustworthy, and constantly fluctuating in value. Therefore, in 1803, he introduced the franc germinal, a new, stable currency backed by gold and silver. For the first time in years, businesses, investors, and ordinary citizens had money they could actually trust. This wasn't just a financial reform, it was a statement. France was no longer a bankrupt, chaotic mess. Napoleon was proving that he could bring order not just to the battlefield, but to the entire economy. However, he knew that fixing the currency alone wouldn't be enough. The tax system was still an absolute disaster. By centralizing banking under state control, he stabilized the economy, restored confidence in the currency, and ensured that money actually had value again. But the Bank of France wasn't just about stability, it was also about power. Now, Napoleon could regulate loans, control how much money circulated, and, most importantly, make sure the state always had cash to fund his growing ambitions. But fixing the banks wasn't enough. The real issue was the money itself. Chapter 2, Power. Before he took charge, tax collection was so corrupt that tax collectors themselves were often the richest people in town. Some regions were overtaxed while others paid nothing at all, and a huge portion of state revenue simply disappeared into the pockets of bureaucrats. Therefore, Napoleon ripped the whole system apart. He introduced direct taxation, got rid of the shady middlemen, and made sure everyone paid their fair share. But, of course, Not everyone was happy about this. The rich weren't thrilled about losing their loopholes, and small farmers and merchants, who had often avoided taxes altogether, suddenly had to start contributing. Some industries thrived under his reforms, while others struggled. But Napoleon wasn't trying to make everyone happy, he was trying to make France rich. Yet, even with a reformed banking system, a strong currency, and a working tax structure, there was still one major problem. Napoleon was spending an absolutely insane amount of money on war. His economy functioned, but it was built on a simple truth. France needed to keep expanding in order to keep paying for itself. And when war alone couldn't bring in enough revenue, he got creative. Chapter 3. The Downfall. By 1804, Napoleon was filthy rich and ridiculously powerful. He crowned himself emperor, because who needs the Pope, right? With an empire expanding across Europe and an economy flourishing, he seemed untouchable. Napoleon's finances were in great shape, fueled by his innovative economic reforms and endless military conquests. The Bank of France was solid, the new currency. The franc germinal had stabilized the economy, and taxes were flowing into the state coffers. Napoleon had created a self-sustaining war machine. He was living proof that a powerful ruler could build an empire on financial foresight and military conquest. But as history has shown time and time again, success breeds arrogance. Napoleon's confidence, bordering on hubris, began to cloud his judgment. His ability to fund his military through conquests and financial reforms had been his strength, but it was also his fatal flaw. The tipping point came in 1812. When Napoleon made the classic billionaire mistake, he overexpanded. His ill-fated campaign in Russia was supposed to be a quick and decisive win, but it turned into a disaster of epic proportions. His army, once an unstoppable force, was ravaged by the Russian winter and the scorched earth tactics of the retreating Russian forces. The defeat was not just military, it was economic. The massive financial resources he had funneled into maintaining such a vast military presence were wasted. The toll on his economy was catastrophic. Napoleon's military machine, which had been his greatest asset, was now his greatest liability. The loss in Russia was a death a house of cards, built on military victories, conquest, and land grabs. The minute those military victories stopped, the money stopped flowing. .nl for the economic system he had so carefully built. Napoleon's empire was based on perpetual conquest. As long as France kept expanding, money kept flowing. But once the wars started going wrong, the entire financial infrastructure that had underpinned his empire began to crumble. The reality was that Napoleon's economy was a house of cards, built on military victories, conquest, and land grabs. The minute those military victories stopped, the money stopped flowing. The military disaster in Russia, combined with the growing resistance from other European powers, set the stage for Napoleon's financial collapse. By 1814, France was facing bankruptcy. The once proud economy was bleeding out, and the state coffers were drained. Napoleon, now fully aware of his economic miscalculation, was forced to abdicate in April 1814. He was exiled to Elba, but that wasn't the end of his story. His return in 1815, known as the 100 Days, was a brief and futile comeback. His ultimate defeat at Waterloo signaled the final collapse of both his empire and his financial system. So, what's the takeaway here? Napoleon wasn't just a warlord. He was a financial mastermind who understood the intricate balance between military power and economic stability. His success was built on a combination of military conquest, economic reforms, and savvy financial decisions. The Bank of France, the new currency, and his bold tax reforms were part of his grand plan to create a sustainable empire. He made France rich, powerful, and influential. But in the end, his financial genius was undermined by his inability to recognize when enough was enough. Napoleon's downfall wasn't caused solely by a single mistake. It was the cumulative effect of his relentless ambition and overextension. His empire was financed by war, and the wars couldn't go on forever. As his military overreached and his economic system became strained, it became clear that his empire wasn't as indestructible as he had thought. In the end, Napoleon's story is both a lesson in ambition and in knowing your limits. Financial success can only carry you so far when it's built on a foundation of constant expansion and conquest. Once the wars stopped, so did the money. And once the money stopped, so did Napoleon's empire. Cheers.